This is TLV1.
The Tel Aviv Review.
Hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review. I'm your host, Gilad Halpern.
And I'm your co-hostess, Dalia Shenlin.
Every week we interview authors of books and research and other things that we find interesting. If you like us, please consider supporting us on Patreon. You can find out about us on our homepage. That's tlv1.fm/Tel Aviv Review.
And as you know, we like to read books about essential topics and talk to the authors. Living here, I think that one of the most essential topics is the Arabic language. Let's be honest, not enough Israelis, certainly Israeli Jews, know it, even though we live here in the Middle East. To that end, we're very pleased to introduce Rabbi Berman and Christy Bandak today, the author and editor, respectively, of a unique kind of book about the Arabic language. Let me introduce our two guests. Rabbi Berman has an MPA from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, an MBA from Baruch School of Business, and he is the founder and director of the Halachic Organ Donor Society. He has a blog at the Times of Israel. He's published in many other places. And he's been studying Arabic for about a decade and considers himself an aficionado of idioms in English, Hebrew, and Arabic. Christy Bandak is joining us from Jerusalem remotely. She has studied at Hebrew University. She holds a PhD from the University of Navarra in Spain in Spanish philology. She's an expert in Old Spanish texts and Arabic languages. And she has taught spoken Arabic for a very long time to non-native speakers. We have invited them here to talk about their brand new book called Min Taq Taq, a collection of Arabic idioms in the Palestinian dialect, published by Minerva Publishing House in 2021. It's fresh off the press. I'd like to also add that Minerva is a publisher that publishes textbooks, study aids, and dictionaries in the field of Middle Eastern languages, Arabic, Hebrew, Farsi, and Aramaic, together with works on indigenous Arab culture, especially Palestinian folklore. Robbie and Christy, thank you for being here on the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you very much for having us.
Robbie, you're the author, so I'm going to start with you. Before we even get into Arabic, why idioms? Do you think there is something special about idioms in general, or particularly Arabic idioms?
That's a great question. I think idioms in general are the key to any language. When I first made Aliyah 31 or 32 years ago, I was at the Misrad HaPnim, and this woman was asking me for an inordinate amount of arcane documents that I really didn't think I needed, and it was kind of ridiculous and onerous. At a certain point, I said to her, translating from English into Hebrew, At nohegat oti bananot. You're driving me bananas. And she looked at me like, are you insane? There are no bananas on the table. I'm not driving you anywhere. What do you mean? And I realized then that I need to study idioms. So when you walk into Stemetsky's, there's over 20, 25 books on Hebrew idioms, and there's not one book on Arabic idioms. And I was studying the Arabic language, and I thought, this is what's really needed. It doesn't exist. I have to make my own. So I started collecting them, and that's how I came up with the idea to start collecting, more and more idioms.
And how do you even approach this formidable endeavor to start collecting? I mean, how do you start?
So I first started when I was coming across idioms. I had a conversation with an Arab gentleman, a serious conversation about a serious topic, something political. And he said to me, Hon marbat al-faras, here the horse is tied up. And I said, what horse? I said, are you a falach? I thought you have a car. You don't have a horse. And he was saying, there's an idiom which means, like in Hebrew, po kavor kelev, here's where the dog is buried. This is the main crux of the issue, hon marbat al-faras. So I realized that I needed to bone up, as they say, which is an English idiom, right? I needed to bone up on Arabic idioms, and I started to write them down whenever I encountered them. Minerva Press, as you mentioned, is the largest publisher in the world of spoken Arabic. I bought all of their books and started going through them to see if I came across any other idioms. And then in conversations with other people, and then eventually I wrote them down. Eventually I got to about 1,000 idioms. And I realized that this could really be a book and help other people. Then I engaged Christy. Christy is my teacher. She's an unbelievable Arabic teacher. And she's also incredibly diligent and very detail-oriented, which I'm not. So I asked if she would join and help me put this together and be the editor of the book. And then Christy brought to the table many idioms herself, hundreds of idioms, I think. And she researched them. I'll let Christy speak to that fact about how she came across some of the idioms.
Actually, I want to ask Christy, did you have a special passion or a soft spot for idioms before Robbie approached you on this as somebody who teaches Arabic in the spoken form?
Yes and no. I can say that my passion for idioms was a neutral, moderate.
A neutral passion. I think I want to adopt that phrase.
Till Robert came in And like in the beginning, he asked me to review some things. I reviewed them, and I thought it was just a matter of some hours or some pages, and that's it. But then we both discovered that it was a huge project. So my passion was in crescendo all the time. And then I reached like the stage of like, I don't want to say obsessed, but probably it was obsession because like, it's like when you need to buy shoes and you go out to the street and you don't see people, you just see shoes. So the same happened. The same happened in my case. Like I was just like I had a detector for idioms in real life. So I started adding many idioms to the table, and it was really a very involving task.
I want to ask you, as a native speaker, I mean, when we speak our own language, as Robbie pointed out in his banana story, we take them for granted. We may not even see them. Did you notice new phrases that you really just didn't think about as a native speaker yourself before?
Yes, of course. Of course. We native speakers in all languages, they just say things, say idioms because they are very expressive. They express the situation they are in, their feelings, their anger, their frustration. They simply are precise, and natives know when exactly to use them. So, but writing a book about these things was an invitation to dive into my own language and to make a lot of research to know what is the real meaning, because sometimes it's the literal meaning. I mean, many times it's not that obvious, and there are many obscure meanings. So we had to make research to know what is the literal meaning, and from there, we know the meaning, the actual meaning, but we wanted to translate literally, and sometimes it was really one of the challenges in this work.
We had a great story once, Christy, where Christy had taught me an idiom that we were including in the book about, do you want the grape or do you want to fight with the guard of the vineyard? And it means, right, do you want to continue arguing or do you want to come to some resolution? So Christy, tell the story about the cab driver.
That's right. It was my story. I didn't remember that, Robert. Thank you. Once I took a taxi in Bethlehem, and I told him I want to go to this place. And he went from a street that I didn't know. So I told him, why are you going from here? The other way is shorter. And he told me, but what do you want? بدك العنب ولا تقاتل الناطور? Which means, do you want to take the grape or a quarrel with the guard of the vineyard? So it was really very funny because I wanted to help him to go from a shorter way, but he knew better than me because of traffic.
So just to give you a sense of how much you need to really understand idioms to speak a language, I once went out with a woman, an Israeli woman, who insisted on speaking English, but she didn't really speak English. But she insisted, so I said, okay. So I said, how are you? She said, on face. I'm on face. I said, okay, man, you can't say that. Doesn't translate. So if you don't, so people think, you can go to a Ulpan and you can learn how to take verbs and change them according to the form and gender, etc. And you can buy a dictionary and learn words, but you can't pick up idioms. Usually you pick them up catch as catch can on the street. It's not very methodical. It's not very comprehensive. And that's why you need books. And that's why there are many books in many different languages, but there's none in Arabic until Min Taq Taq.
Can you describe the division of labor between the two of you as the author and the editor? What does it mean really in practice? Or was it like a fully equitable joint effort?
Christy did a lot of the heavy lifting. I mean, in the beginning, what happened was after I collected about 1,000 idioms, I bought some books in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt, and books that were had idioms in them. And then I gave them to some friends of mine who are also Arabic teachers. I asked them to choose which ones are used in Israel and in the West Bank, used by the Palestinian dialect, understood by the Palestinian dialect. And then I give them to Christy. Christy went ahead and collected more. And then Christy went ahead and did a lot of the heavy lifting together, I had some ideas. I wanted to create a new transliteration. If you know, the book has transliteration. And I didn't like transliteration that exists out there, even Minerva's transliteration. So, for example, if they want to have you pronounce a word with a long E, they will have an E with a bar on top of it. Well, I have to know that means that it's a long E. I'm like, ink doesn't really cost that much money. Why can't we just have two E's in a row? And that will give people the idea that we mean E and not eh. And so that's what I did. And then Christy had her own ideas that she added, and we created together this transliteration. And then there was a lot of work to do. The literary transliteration was easy. Christy did that. But even there was some problems, because in Arabic, there are a lot of times you have words which are bastardized. They don't mean anything in reality. They're just a word in Arabic that was changed and morphed into something else. So there's no real translation. So Christy and I had to make a decision about that. But then I had the job of trying to find parallel English idioms. And it's not always easy for you. Like, for example, let me give you an example. There's one idiom, I know Christy and I we spent days on one idiom trying to figure out what could be the possible meaning. And I think it was, Christy, what was it? بيطلع على الصوت عالي?
بيطلع عليه بالصوت العالي.
بيطلع عليه الصوت العالي, which means, it literally means, he came out on him in a high voice. Okay, what the hell does that mean? How do you go ahead and do a parallel English idiom? So there's no parallel English idiom, because what it means is when a person is like caught doing something wrong, he knows he's to blame. All he does is kind of get defensive and yells and speaks very loudly and aggressively to cover up for the fact that he's to blame.
That is an extremely useful idiom in life, and I plan to adopt it. I want to ask you guys about a sort of zoom out question for a minute, though, even before we go into details, because I want to talk about numerous examples. But before that, you do describe in the beginning, I think both of you, but I think Robbie maybe more in your introduction, that you see the book as more than just an endeavor of language, but you really hope that it is going to bring the cultures closer. And, by kind of unlocking the way people interact with each other. And maybe just we'll start with Christy. I mean, do you guys see this more as a technical language kind of book, or do you see it more driven by the desire to bring people together who don't clearly have enough contact in this region?
Of course. I think in language, only and solely technical things don't exist, because there's a huge background.
That's a good answer.
Behind it. There's a cultural heritage. There's a lot behind the words. This is not a like word-to-word technical or mechanical translation. So it's learning a lot about the culture, about the sensitivity to where, like, regarding others' ways of thinking and saying things, and like their conception of life. Or family, of many things like we have in the book. So it goes farther than the mere words. So this is what was really very interesting in the book, that it's not only linguistical, it goes beyond that. It's the social, it's the dimension, it's the cultural dimension. And here we have, I think Robert has an anecdote to tell about this, when there was a tense situation, Robert,
yes,
with a woman in East Jerusalem.
Well, first of all, Christy, I always have an anecdote for everything, so it's not like I'm lacking for anecdotes. But thanks for the prompt. It doesn't take much to prompt me. No, it actually wasn't talpiot. Well, let me start off by saying that, to add to what Christy has said, when I'm speaking with an Arab, and my Arabic is not that good. When I speak with an Arab and I use an idiom, immediately a smile breaks out across their face, because number one, they're shocked that I know the idiom. All of a sudden, they feel a little bit more familiar with me, familial, friendly. All of a sudden, they realize I know their culture. They appreciate, their smile also represents that they appreciate that I took the time to learn their culture, their idiom. So I was in Talpiot, and my car got damaged, and I went to go have it fixed, and the guy wanted a lot of money. It was two Arab gentlemen, and I was trying to negotiate with him. I got a little bit heated. I was like, why does it cost that much money? It's not that much of a big deal. And then I finally said, Kulna ulatissa. We're all kulanu Yeladim Teisha, right? We're all children of 9, meaning we're all children of 9 months, meaning we're all this human beings, right? Our parent, if you weren't a preemie, right, your mother took 9 months to give birth to you. So we're all children of that. We're all human beings here, can't we? And once I said that, they started laughing, brought down the tension. They said, "Wow, you really know our culture, our language. That's really amazing." Footnote is I didn't get the discount that I was looking for, which as a Jew, that's the most important thing. And unfortunately, it didn't work on that level, but it definitely brought down the tension between us. And it always works. It always puts a smile on people's faces.
How many of those idioms that are in the book are specifically Palestinian? And a rough estimate, do you think, how many of them could be understood outside of Palestine, in the greater Arab world? Right.
So I don't know the answer to that, but I'll tell you that the criteria that we use was any idiom, doesn't matter the origin of it, whether it originated in Egypt or whether it originated in Lebanon. Our criteria is that any idiom that is used or understood in the West Bank, Gaza, and Israel, that's what we're including in the book. So, because my point of the book was to get people to understand how to speak Arabic with the locals, and that's what I wanted to happen. What's originally which, I don't know. We have over 1,800 unique idioms in the book, which is a huge achievement. And a lot of that I appreciate, thanks to Christy, but a lot of them are repeated because the way we divided the book, one chapter is one section of the book. The first section are chapters based around themes such as love or patience, etc. And the other section of the book are chapters that revolve around words that are used. So every idiom has a word like head or foot has their own chapter.
Who would have thought there were so many idioms based on the word finger? I did not think that. I personally never thought that.
Yes. I must tell you that I was a little bit concerned because there were a lot of curse words in here as well. And some of them are pretty raunchy and pretty direct. And I had to ask myself, do I want to be honest with people? But I took my lead from my friend Guy Charette, who also has a show here, Tel Review 1. And he is very blatant with him explaining. He wants people to understand the language and use it as used. So my hat's off to Guy Charette. I followed his lead and hopefully I won't get crucified for it.
Well, I want to get into some nitty gritty. Now, is that idiom or slang? I could make a case for both, but let's put it aside.
Make it.
Well, those words do have meanings.
Okay.
Grit is like grains of sand, so we're getting down to the details. So I'm going to go for idiom. My question is following on the Palestinian theme. You also emphasize throughout the book that this reflects Jerusalem expressions and dialogue. So, Christy, you're the Jerusalemite. Are we allowed to even be having this conversation in Tel Aviv? I mean, kind of kidding. But will people in other parts of Israel or in Palestinian areas understand most of these expressions?
This is a good question. In reality, we Arabic in the same region has different dialects. Like we have the Palestinian dialect, but then we have different regional dialects. The north, the south, the Bedouins, the rural dialect, the urban dialect. So as Robert has always studied in this area, me too. And this is like all books of Arabic almost talk about the Jerusalem urban dialect. So what we opted for this because it's like a standard urban Palestinian dialect. So of course it will be understood everywhere, even in other Arab regions. Like there are some varieties, let's say with some words in the north, because I had some friends in the north that I asked for the meaning of some idioms, and they say it in a different way. The way we say it here, it means a different thing for them. This was something very, very flexible. So what we chose for this book is like the standard urban dialect in terms of the Arabic, writing and the Arabic pronunciation, and also in terms of the meaning itself.
So I want to say, to add to that, Christy, that I found that working with you to be very frustrating because you were honest with me in saying that this idiom could be understood in the North this way, and in the South it has a certain different valence. And as a perfectionist, that really bothered me. And I explained to Christy, I said, America is 10,000 times, okay, I'm exaggerating here, much larger than Israel. And if you said to someone in California or said to someone in Florida or in Boston, they threw him under the bus, everyone knows what that idiom means. And there's no variation of that. They threw him under the bus. They sacrificed him, etc.
I have to say that just yesterday, I was on a Zoom call with a bunch of Americans, and somebody said to me, Dahlia, you can write this document with your pinky. And I said, what? I've never heard that before.
Oh, really? I
never
heard it before either, but wait a minute.
From context, but it's not an idiom I was ever familiar with.
Okay. So he just,
who knows? So I'm saying, what I'm saying is that maybe when you stop and think about your own language, that we're native speakers, the things that were transparent to us that we never noticed, that there are disparities in regions, maybe we start to notice them if we pay attention to them.
I don't know of any idiom, honestly, and maybe it's because I'm ignorant, but I don't know of any idiom that is understood in the East Coast differently than is understood in the West Coast.
So the same one. Okay, so I'm saying there's one I didn't know, and you're saying there could be the same one interpreted differently.
Yes, what I can add here is that we're talking about dialects. So dialects usually are regional expressions of the language. So we're not talking about modern standard Arabic, that if we have an idiom, it can be understood everywhere.
Christy, for God's sake, how big is Israel that we have a regional dialect? Israel is so small. Why is the South, which is only like a 45-minute drive from the North, why is that a different regional dialect? It's kind of maybe it's because that modern transportation is only, let's say, 100 years old. So 100 years ago, there was a huge difference between the North and the South.
Okay, and what about like further afield? If someone from Syria, let alone, I don't know, the Gulf or Morocco, looked at the book, would they be completely amazed?
We may have the Khalijis coming here any day now, right?
So I will tell you that I got a call from the Israeli intelligence unit, one of the, I won't say which one, and they want to buy some of these books from me for their intelligence agents, officers. And I can imagine there are some people outside of this country who might be buying the books for the same reason. So this is very specific for people who want to, if you've seen Fauda, right? So that he's given up at the end in the prison cell because he didn't know this certain reference, right?
I was just thinking of that theme.
But by the way, Eli Cohen, right? There was an incredible docudrama that was created on Khan.
That's the Israeli spy that was caught in Syria in the 1960s.
Right. So
and Khan being Israeli state television, which is privately run. Yes.
Thank you. I have to carry you guys around with me all the time so you can explain, because when I speak, people don't get it. But I make too many assumptions. But they interviewed the guy, the head of Syrian intelligence, who's still alive. And he said when they caught Eli Cohen with this transmission, they knew they had a spy, but they didn't know who he was, right? He could have been a spy from Saudi Arabia, could have been a spy from Egypt. They didn't know who he was. And there was many different reasons for there to be different spies from different countries. So he said on the television interview, the head of his Syrian intelligence said to Eli Cohen, "Lama enta kunt fil Buenos Aires, when enta salat?" He said, when you were in Buenos Aires, where did you pray? And he said, "Ana salat fil Jama el Muslimi." I prayed in the Muslim mosque. And he said, right away I knew I didn't have a Muslim. Because no Muslim would say he prayed in a Muslim mosque. They would say he prayed in a mosque. Only a Jew or Christian would say, I prayed in a Muslim mosque.
To answer Gilead's question, if a person from the Gulf or from Syria sees this book, if they will understand it or not, I think, yes, they will understand it. We have to say that we're talking about the Palestinian dialect, and the Palestinian dialect is part of the Levantine dialect. Levantine dialect includes the Palestinian, the Jordanian, the Syrian, and the Lebanese. So more or less, we have the same, the same margin of criterion, or more or less, it's the same dialect. It's Levantine, with the characteristics of each one, of each region. But then a person from the Gulf, I think, he will understand most of the idioms in this book, because this is Arabic. We cannot forget that we're talking about Arabic language. So, and it includes also some idioms that come from Fusha, from the standard language. So, and many, this is not another language. As you know, Arabic is in a state of diglossia. So we have different, like two levels of, like two registers of the language, the daily one and the standard formal one. And in Arabic, it is marked. In other European languages, it existed in some periods in history, but in Arabic, it is still coexisting. And there's a lot of, I don't want to say conflict, but there's a lot of like some parties that are for modern standard Arabic and some parties are for the dialect.
I just wanted to share with you one of the things I love about Arabic idioms is they're very visual, some of them. So, for example, there's one visual when you want to say a guy is a troublemaker, or like he's just causing himself trouble and other people trouble. You say, Hamal is-salim bil-ard. He's carrying the ladder horizontally. And I just picture like Laurel and Hardy trying to get through a doorway, carrying a ladder, horizontally. Christy, by the way, this idiom, Hamal is-salim bil-ard, is that more that he's making trouble for himself or making trouble for other people?
I think it can be both of them, but usually it's for himself. Like he doesn't know how to carry the ladder.
Right. And the other one I love is if you want to talk about chaos, like things are going helter-skelter, things are... Fauda. You go, Zay el-hamam el-maktuwa maito. It's like the bathhouse. You picture like a Turkish bathhouse where all of a sudden the water was cut off. And you can imagine, like, picture people full of soap suds and their hair's full of soap, and everything goes on. And all of a sudden there's no more water. I mean, there's people going to be going nuts, right?
That is a great image.
You know that there's a story behind this.
Go for it.
Which is like, usually they used to go to the bath with a metallic, let's say, can. So they pour on themselves the water. And when there was, like, when the water was cut, they used to to make noise with these cans. So the water carrier or whoever was responsible would know that there was no water. So there was no water. It was very noisy.
That's
noisy
fascinating. I didn't know that. That's fascinating.
But these are really plenty of really fascinating curiosities. But I'd like to ask you, perhaps an inverse question. Were there many universal idioms, things that you were familiar with, you, Robbie, as a native English speaker?
Yes, there were. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to add to the question to actually get the question before Robbie gets a chance to answer, which is that I noticed, it jumped out at me from the book, that there are quite a number of...
I wouldn't agree with you. I wouldn't say quite. There are. I wouldn't say there's quite a number.
Can I give you my favorite examples?
Sure.
Okay. Clear as sun. I mean, we say clear as day. That seems quite overlapping. Put the dots on the letters. We say dot the I's. It's maybe a slightly different meaning, but it sounds overlapping.
But there are some that are even one for one.
And my favorite as a Brooklynite, get out of my face. I mean, that is...
Right.
Actually, I have to say that
universal.
many of them work in Hebrew as well.
What do you mean?
Ufli mi'apanim.
Ufli mi'apanim, Baruch HaShemesh.
Right.
All these that you just...
Right. So my question was...
Well, don't forget, some of them are borrowed. Some of them, clearly they're borrowed. Which one came first, I don't know. But
I guess my question was going to be to elaborate on Gilad's. Do you think, after having done this, that there are certain concepts that everybody in every language really needs a very handy way to say because they're just important ideas?
Yes. I think that every person should know how to say El-bab bifawat jamal, which means the door is big enough for a camel. So if you don't like what I have to say, you and your camel, it's actually a door.
I thought it was gate.
Both you and your camel can get the hell out of here because, nothing's stopping you. But I want to make a point here and just make a distinction because a lot of people, including this article that came out in Al-Quds newspaper, they confused my book and they said my book is a collection of Proverbs. It is not Proverbs. And most people, and I promise you, I won't mention names, I don't want to embarrass anyone, but even professors of literature, I've heard use the words idiom and proverbs interchangeably, and they're two separate things. Proverbs are sentences which convey wisdom or try to describe reality, like birds of a feather flock together. So you're describing a reality that people usually hang out with people of their own kind or think alike, right? That is a proverb. That is not an idiom. Idioms are words that are not meant to be taken literally, and they're not giving you any wisdom or advice or describing anything. So what's funny is the gentleman who wrote this article for Al-Quds, he wrote in it that Robbie's book of Proverbs, which he got wrong, it's not Proverbs, he said it's part of the resistance, the muqawama neged the ihtilal, the occupation. He tied it into the occupation. I said, how did he do that? So this is how he did it. He said that the Israelis are trying to erase the identity of the Palestinians. And since Robbie put together a book of Proverbs, which does give a lot of background and history and culture, not so much idioms. It does a little bit, but not so much like a proverb. So therefore, he blew this into this whole thing that somehow I'm a resistance fighter for the Palestinians. I don't know. It was quite amusing for me to read it, but yeah.
Christy, did you see the book as an act of resistance against the occupation?
No. I saw, really, I'm proud of the book, and I'm grateful to Robert because it was an opportunity for me to transmit much more than politics or opinions, or this is much more. This is language, this is culture, this is background, this is history, this is creating empathy also, like what you were saying before, Robert, that when you use idioms, you mentioned that in the beginning, and now also when you use it with people, I think mistakes are accepted. Please read the book, and you can make mistakes. There's no problem, because even if people make mistakes, that, by the way, people in Arabic especially, they need a lot of time and practice. But this is only with the effort of trying to say the idiom in Arabic with an Arab, this is really to be very appreciated, and it even sounds funny when, no? And Robert, we laughed a lot when you made mistakes trying to tell me something or misusing.
Me make mistakes?
Maybe Christy, you laughed.
I want to tell you something funny. I don't know if speaking about mistakes, I always hate when I read a book where the author says, with this kind of false humility, that I take all responsibility for any mistakes. And I wrote in my introduction, I take no responsibility for mistakes found in my book. That's what I hired Christy for. She's the editor. If there are any mistakes, she's to blame.
What about Hebrew? Is there any overlap, or specifically a lot of overlap between the two languages, the two so-called sister languages?
Like the idiom imele, which has some
yamma,
exactly.
yeah,
which means I'm fearful. I fear something.
Right. I once snuck I once illegally transported a bunch of Palestinian children over the Green Line to go to the beach. They'd never been to the beach before. So children under 16 don't need a tasrih. They don't need paperwork. But one of the girls that I took, the older sister, was 17, and she legally needed it. But there's no way I was going to get it. I needed help with the children. I had someone to watch them on the beach, and there's no way she's going to get tasrih. So I just brought her in. But when we passed the border, the Mahsom, she was sitting there going, Ya Rab, Ya Rab, Ya Rab, Yamma, 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 Ya Rab, Ya Rab, like, oh God, mommy, mommy, mommy. And then when we passed, she's like, oh, thank God, Nushkur Allah, thank the Lord, So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I imagine, Israelis do the same thing, and if they ever have to, they're in a reverse situation, although I don't know how I can imagine that happening with an Israeli.
There is no reverse situation.
Right.
Pretty much.
Right.
I have a question for, both of you, but we can start with Christy. Okay, this has been a year when some of us are catching up during Corona time on things we always wanted to do and never did. So I have begun studying Arabic, focusing a little bit on spoken, but mostly on reading. And I'm just going to do full disclosure here. It's my dad who's teaching me literacy. And I want to know if every native Arabic speaker has to have bionic vision, because the diacriticals are so small.
Yes.
How do you get used to this? I know maybe if you're a native speaker, you have no answer because you're always used to it.
Teacher as well.
But you're a teacher as well. Christy, how do you deal with, people who aren't used to reading Arabic, struggling to figure out all the diacriticals and, small letters and such?
But we can say the same with Hebrew.
Maybe it's just that I'm used to it.
Well, I know, to be fair, Christy, I mean, if you take a look at what's going on, I'm not a lazy guy in the least, and when I just give up on Facebook trying to read people's posts, because for some reason the font they use on Facebook for Arabic is 1/3 the size of Hebrew letters. I don't know why they do it, and I have to find special software to enlarge it. But it's almost impossible for a non-Arabic native speaker to read a post on Facebook written in Arabic. It's just infinitesimally small, and you cannot read those correct diacritical marks. And as you know, in Arabic, if you're missing a dot on top, it's a ch, a dot in the middle, it's a j, and the bottom is a j, and without a dot, it's a h. So if you miss that one little dot, it's over.
So, Christy, as a native speaker, you don't notice that. Is that right?
Yes, I notice it, especially as a teacher. But I think people get used to it. And if the native speaker has a good level in Fusha, There's no problem with reading any post on Facebook, for example. But what happens is that sometimes people are really weak in their own language because of this diglossia that I mentioned before. So, but I think we get used to it. And then another difficulty that a non-native can face is the lack of vowels, because when, like in the newspaper, there are no vowels. Vowels, the diacritic, it's not diacritic, they are really vowels, harakat, are used only in the beginning when you learn how to vocalize the words. And they are used also in Fusha teaching, like when you need to vocalize all the text in order to know the function of a word. And like this is a grammatical, let's say, study. But in newspapers, in normal books like novels or posts on Facebook, there's no such a thing. So you need to think the double, not only reading, but you have to see if this word can be understood in another way or not, according to the context.
But to be fair, Christy, I mean, the same student of languages has the same problem in Hebrew, because Hebrew, you don't have the harakat, the vowels written either. And also similarly in Arabic as in Hebrew, sometimes there are hints from the letters themselves. So if you have a yud in between two letters, you know most probably there's a chirik before that letter. Same thing in Arabic. If there's a ya, you know that most likely, not all the time, but most likely there's an e sound before.
A kasra.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm getting there.
Shatra, ya ustaz.
Shway. Now, listen, unfortunately, we have to end, because I, at least, could keep talking about this for many hours. But I want to ask kind of a theoretical question. You know, I've worked in many countries watching focus group research, and I've listened to simultaneous translators. And the coolest one was Hungary, because the simultaneous translators, when they're on autopilot, translate the idioms. And they have, let me tell you, some very strange idioms in Hungarian. And I thought, it must say something about their personality. So, you know, a sort of cultural personality. Can you try to generalize, either of you or both of you, anything about at least this community of Arabic speakers who would understand these idioms, the Jerusalem, the Palestinian Levant dialect? Is there any sort of generalization you can make, having gone through in such depth these idioms? Well,
I personally find that in the book Min Taq Taq, we have a lot of idioms that have to do with body parts and animals. And I don't know whether I can generalize and say that's different than the idioms in Hungary, but the book Min Taq Taq has a lot. I'll tell you something interesting. What do you think is as far as the chapters, which chapter do you think has the most amount of idioms listed in them?
I did not count.
It's the body parts, isn't it?
Finger.
No.
Oh, I was going to say the finger page.
No, the category in the first section of Min Taq Taq, which revolves around the theme, it's the theme of mashakal, problems.
Oh.
Now, one could speculate why that might be, but that's the biggest one. So you asked a theoretical question. I'll ask a technical question. Where can one obtain Min Taq Taq?
You'll tell us.
MinTaqTaq.com. There you go. You can buy the book on MinTaqTaq.com. There you go.
Christy, do you want to add to Robbie's answer?
No, just to say that, for example, eyes and heart, there's a lot, and I think this reflects a way of thinking, no? Also, head has a lot of, I'm talking about the literal, because the conceptual idioms are like more flexible. But the literal ones, you go to the chapter of eyes and the chapter of ras, head, and also heart, and you find a lot, and they are very used.
So I just want to say to that respect, like when a person's afraid, so in English you'll say his heart was in his mouth. But in Arabic you say albo wikal bin ijre. His heart fell between his legs.
I read that.
Now it's very similar. But if you're having a conversation with someone and you say his heart went in his mouth, the Arabs going to look at you like, is he a cannibal? What do you mean his heart was in his mouth? Whose heart was he eating, right? So these are small, subtle things, and you need to learn them in order to speak the language fluently. So anyone who wants to learn how to speak fluently spoken Arabic, Min Taq Taq is the book for you.
Speaking of subtlety, in Hebrew, it's his heart fell into his underwear. There you go. All right, Robbie Berman, Christy Van Dijk, thank you very much for joining us today to talk about Min Taq Taq, your book about Arabic idioms in the Palestinian dialect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And also many thanks to Itai Shelem, our producer and sound engineer. And now we've got a request. Many or most of you listen to us on the Apple Podcast app, and we would like to ask you to please consider writing us a review of any kind. You too can support us by going to our website and subscribing onto our Patreon campaign. Check out our archive. It has more than 600 interviews. Like us on Facebook. Our page is called the Tel Aviv Review Ideas from Israel. Follow me and Dalia on Twitter. And join us again next week for another edition of the Tel Aviv Review. And until then, from Dalia and from me, goodbye.